Maybe. There, it went live.
There we
Awesome. All
go.
right.
We
Technical difficulties.
at the last minute, of course. Welcome, everyone. How are you today?
And obviously, in good old frozen Nebraska, there's technical issues. So
I
bear with us. We are going to try and get through this, but
I think that's what makes our live is like we're not scripted. We're not like we don't even put makeup on. Like we're just two real women who are having a conversation and we are so glad that you are tuning in. So welcome to our Facebook pages. Welcome YouTube. Welcome Twitch. Welcome X. Welcome to our Instagram. Welcome to hold on. I'm going to get them all. I know it. Hold on, let me think. Pinterest, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Do we get Rumble in there? All right, what am I forgetting? X.
Amazon Music.
There we go. Welcome.
Pretty much any streaming or listening platform that you can end up and find, we are on. So I
We
had someone
are.
reach out to me over the weekend and ask if we were on Spotify, and absolutely.
We
So
are.
if you can't find us, reach out. I will share you a link.
Absolutely. Well, again, happy Monday. This is our second Monday of the month. It feels like this month is moving so fast. What do you think?
It is. It's hard to believe that today is already the 10th, right? It seems like we were just getting into November, and I was talking to my daughter about her birthday that was on the 4th, and here we are at the 10th of
Mhm.
November, year's almost over, and today is my oldest stepson's birthday. So happy birthday shout out to Tristan. He turned 27 today. So I have a
Oh,
17-year-old and a 27 and two in between. So um, yeah,
well, happy birthday, Tristan. And happy
absolutely.
belated
Absolutely.
birthday to your daughter, too. We
Right.
missed you last week.
Yes, ma'am.
So we had we, Coach Sly and I, we were having our coaches roundtable and you had something come up. And so we were calling it a line. We had a coach's line, her and me. That was it, a line. So,
Which and which that's amazing. And yes, I did end up and have some personal issues come up last minute that I had to take the night off, and that's the beauty in what we've created, right? Obviously we're not on topic for tonight, but that is the beauty in what we created, is because I know that I can end up and step away, and you and Sly and everyone will end up and hold it together. And for that, I mean, I am, so grateful that we have the group that we created, because it's just knowing that that is there. I didn't have to worry and I didn't have to stress. It was like, hey, I've got this. I've got to step away. You guys took it over and you ran the show and you rocked it. I mean, I can tell by, the response that we've got with it. We've got, the listeners, and you two did amazing. So kudos to you holding down the fort. The two of you were amazing.
well, I'll pay you later for those kind comments. Put it on my tab.
Yeah. But
But
but it
we've
is.
got, go ahead.
It's such a relief to be able to step away. It's such a relief to be able to step away and know that it is in, good hands, and not stress over it, because it's just part of life, right? We are,
Mhm.
like you said, we are those real people, and things come up. Our life isn't perfect. So sometimes that happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we thought we would come talk tonight about the time change and season change and even food change. And because not only are we seeing it in both of our personal lives, right? We're seeing it in our clients' lives. We're seeing it in the group, the BNC community group. So we're just kind of seeing it all around, and I see it in every day. Like I'm sure you do too. Outside of our what do you call it? Our world that we've created,
Mhm.
and it just. Let's start with time change. What do you think?
Sure, absolutely. And it's one of the main contributors to our health, right? And that's one of the things that people don't put enough emphasis on, the circadian side, the time change, whatever you want to end up and call it. But it plays such a huge role. And that's one of the reasons why I've gotten so passionate about it, in my life. Because no matter whether we're talking about, spring, or whether we're talking about fall, whether we're, springing forward or falling back, the time change makes so much difference in so many systems of our body, right? Anywhere from not only our sleep wake, but hormone to metabolism, immune system too. A lot of people end up and think that, oh, it's, cold and flu season, when in reality it's just because our days are shorter and we have less sunlight. But also there's, cardiovascular health, cellular. I mean, it's just, there are so many systems impacted by circadian rhythm.
I seen I think it was on Instagram, a reel tonight that it talked about the time change, and it was this woman, and she's sitting on the couch, and her husband's sitting across from her, and she looks at him, and she looks over at a couch pillow, and he's like, "No, don't do it." And she, in slow motion, goes down, and it's only 7 o'clock. you and she was going for her pillow, and and I thought, oh, how I wish there was a way to show that, because it was just perfect timing for what our conversation tonight is about.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people that, definitely get very sluggish feeling, right? When the time changes. And then there's that flip side, right? Some
Mhm.
people will end up and feel energy. So it's so crazy how our systems are regulated by light. It's not crazy to me, but it's crazy.
Well, it is, right? I
Mhm.
mean, well, and I think the thing is that people don't realize that our bodies are really wired to respond to light.
Mhm.
Um, Morning light that triggers our cortisol, right? That's our get up, go, let's go for the day. Let's get moving. That hormone, and then when evening, the darkness kind of comes in, and it gives us the melatonin uh, uh, cues for rest, and but the kicker is right, is your body is primed to handle certain foods at certain times of the day, and we're going to get into all of that tonight. Even timing of meals is important when it comes to this light code. I know that you and I both, we don't eat past dark. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't occasions where, it's a special occasion or something, and we do. But it's not, it's, I mean, I got home tonight a little after 4, and my husband was already fixing our taco meat, the ground beef. So, I mean, we're geared to eating way before it gets dark. So,
Yeah, and it does end up and create this disruption. So when we are eating later, right? It not only affects the glucose, right? Anytime, depending what you're eating, right? There's a glucose response even to just protein, the whole, protein and carb war. But there is still a meal response, and so
mhm.
when you have that meal response, so does the body in regards of insulin, but also that cortisol side of things, because it does end up and drive cortisol for digestion, and so those end up in opposed melatonin. Well, if you're eating, after sunset, you're eating close to bed, then you're delaying the melatonin, which is also interfering with the leptin. And so there's a lot of again, a lot of systems that have to end up in work, right? In order for you to feel good, in order for your metabolism to be functioning optimally, right? Um, but it goes downstream too in regards of some of these other, systems, thyroid, all of that. When we end up, when we look at our routines, it doesn't just matter in the morning, which, kind of the good, better, best, right?
Mhm.
Scenario, sure. Wake up with sunrise, right? Eating within that 30 minutes, uh, going outside for the cold exposure. So ambient cold exposure is, I use it seasonally. I mean, we were just talking prior to hitting live, right, about my
Yep.
temperature, and it's going to end up and
Yep.
be 15 degrees in the morning, you
Mm.
know. Yeah.
Mm.
Welcome to Nebraska, right?
Yeah.
But there are certain aspects of our day, but also what we do in our day, right? Our breakfast is a important secondary circadian signal, and that starts with actually chewing, not gulping protein drinks, not, that protein and fat help to balance the blood sugar. So it sets up
Mhm.
your day later in the day at breakfast. And that's
Right.
where a lot of people are, shifting their day and really getting their day out of line. So, if you end up and you get up, you see sunrise, you eat your breakfast, a fatty protein, you can have a little carb at that meal. Some people end up and find having, a little bit of carbs at that first meal, such as like an avocado, right? That type of thing, really does end up and set their day up in a better rhythm. But utilizing these different signals, so food, light, and temperature, right, are all going to give you your signals, um, to help your body
Mhm.
in the morning. But what people don't realize oftentimes is that morning signal of sunrise is actually helping their sleep that
Yeah.
night. So people will
Yeah.
end up complaining, right, that and you can see I'm sitting in red light, right? That has to be taken into account as well, is how much we end up when we blast ourselves with artificial blue light.
Mhm.
And if you're blasting yourself with this in the evening, you're eating late in the evening, you're really stimulating this secondary cortisol response instead of
Mhm.
winding down, right?
Mhm.
The lux of light, or the intensity of light, should end up and be lowering at night. And I've had a lot of people ask me, how do you end up and work in the evening and then still get, proper sleep? So it does.
Well, and you're in the red light where I'm wearing the blue blocking glasses.
Mhm.
That's why you can see it's tinted, because I am sitting here on my devices and they're full on, like, they're bright. So I don't want my body to mistake that it's daytime and it's time for me to keep moving along, because in a little bit I'm going to be shutting down and going to bed.
Mhm. Well, and that's where we also end up get the questions, right?
Yep.
About, well, for instance, you made the comment that, your husband was cooking dinner, but there's some people that end up and do have to work, late,
Mhm.
4 or 5 o'clock, and then they're coming home. And that's where at least making sure you are eating something a little bit light in the
Yeah.
evening, keeping it, 3 to 4 hours before bed, and then wearing your blue blockers immediately after, sunset, um, really does end up and make a difference and improve your quality of sleep. And that's where, if we can maximize the melatonin production, you really do end up and get that deeper cellular healing and that repair that we are seeking. And that winter time, right? Fall and winter time is the time that we should be leaning into repair.
Mhm. So, question, what do you say to those people? I had this today. So, the comment I heard was, well, I gave my kiddo a melatonin to get him to sleep.
It,
I know. I know. Well, I didn't say anything. Okay, first of all, because I'm careful about uh unsolicited opinions.
Yeah. Well, and I get both sides of the coin, right?
Mhm.
So I get the fact of getting quality sleep. I'm always going to end up and go, nature's going to end up and be at best. Natural's going to end up and be best over any form of supplement.
Mhm.
That's just the way I am going to end up and preference it. So if you are someone that your meals are, on point, your lighting is on point, I mean, my daughter even ends up and wears blue blockers now when she's, coming home from work and at work in the evening time because she works evenings.
Mm.
But if you are really consistent with all of these other, areas, right? And you need that crutch, I would really I I really have a strong block in recommending anyone take it, but
Mhm. Mhm.
again, if they're not on their phone in the evening, if they're not, if they need that crutch until they are able to really get the basics and the foundations down, um I understand it. Right,
Right.
but there again, is their nutrition on point, right? What are you eating in the winter time, and how does that differ than what they've been eating the other, months out of the year, right?
Right. Well, and that leads us into the seasonal food, the
Mhm.
changes in our food, and why even that. I mean, because what again people don't realize is our food has a light code as well.
Yep.
So I love when you go down this rabbit hole. This is one of my favorite subjects. Um, but uh, first of all, tell folks where they can go to find what's in season for where they live, what that website is.
So those that are in the United States, anyone that is listening elsewhere, it's going to end up and be different. But for those of us in the United States, you can go to seasonalfoodguide.org. It's going to end up and give you a list. Now, depending on your metabolism and depending on your metabolic condition,
Mhm.
some of those foods may not be optimal for you. So take that into account when you are looking at the list. It's going to give you an idea of, what is within a radius of you. But if you are someone that doesn't, don't come in our comment section and say there's nightshades listed, or there's,
Right.
if you don't tolerate nightshades, then just find something on that list that, is what you tolerate. But like I said, it is going to give you that idea, and you can change it. So when you go on there, it gives you like the beginning of the month and it gives you the end of the month. And why that ends up matters is because food is grown under different light. And so as our light shifts and as the angle of the sun shifts, different foods are going to grow in different lighting. So what,
Mhm.
for instance, right? I'm in Nebraska, what we're able to grow now or what has grown, right? We're in the frost and freeze stage right now, so there's not much out there that is growing. I still have green tomatoes on my vine that did not end up and turn red. Um, yes, I could end up and go and, make like green salsa or something. But anyway, and so that's going to transition. Potatoes, all of like the cellar stable is what is going to end up and be in season. Winter squashes, those type of things. But when the UV light shifts below 5, right? It's time to move into more of the other like root vegetables, complex
Mhm.
carbs, get away from the simple sugar fruits, right?
Right.
That's why a lot of people will hear me reference you don't eat a banana in the middle of wintertime. That
Right.
is not the right food code for your latitude. And so this is why it makes a difference. Um, you can also get to know, local farmers, local markets, that type of thing.
Mhm.
Fermented foods is going to end up and be in season. Obviously, protein is always going to end up and be the focus of a meal, right? So I had a coaching session today, and the gal asked me, well, do you end up and have any cookbooks or meal ideas, right, that you can end up and point me to? And I said, well, what I do is, what protein do I have in my freezer, right? We just got a whole beef.
Mhm.
So I have a bunch of beef in there, but I also end up and consume other animals, right? I had chicken for supper tonight. I had chicken for lunch too. That just dawned on me. But anyway, I'm like, I had a chicken and potato for lunch. But I find, I figure out my protein sources, and then I figure out, okay, what am I going to add to that?
Mhm.
Right? What vegetables do I
Right.
enjoy? And obviously, like I said, it's going to end up and be winter squashes. It's going to be root vegetables right now. Fermented foods, cruciferous, those type of things are going to be what's in season for me. Um, and so when then I figured that out, right? What is my complex carbs? What am I adding to that protein? But then also to get diversity. Am I going to add ferments? Am I going to add,
Mhm.
cruciferous? Am I going to add, what am I going to add? I do still consume things like apples and pears in the wintertime. I had a pear with my lunch today. They are lower glycemic and they are lower in deuterium. So that is one of the things with wintertime, because we don't have the higher UV light to help with depleting a lot of the sugars and the deuterium out of the system. So that is kind of, why we end up when we transition our foods as well.
Well, and I think people need to look at food as a seasonal medicine. Um, when you think of your plate as a pharmacy, seriously, adding warm spices, right? Your cinnamons and your ginger in fall, your bitters and greens in the spring, or your body's going to do some natural detox. And you and I were talking about that today at lunch, about all of a sudden we're seeing this uptick on social media of detoxing, right? That's like huge.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that with food. You don't need a bunch of supplements that's going to double you over and send you, on the floor for or in the bathroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but your plate isn't just fuel. It's feedback. It's because again, your gut bacteria changes with the season. So the temperature of the foods, like again, your fall and winter microbes, um, seasonal fiber and fermented foods. You just talked about that. In fact, we had was it Dr. Schindler? Wasn't it? Was that who it was?
Yeah, we had Bill
We've had
Schindler on
several.
in regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had Bill Schindler on in regards of ferments, and we've
Yep.
also had Sean O'Mara on in
Yes.
regards of the ferments. So both of those were great episodes. You can end up
Mhm.
and catch those, especially over here on YouTube.
Mhm.
I don't think they've been uploaded to our listening only, our audio only platforms. I can get them uploaded. If that's something you want, comment, let me know. If you're an only audio only listener, let me know, because we do have several videos on YouTube, but we've just recently, since we did the rebrand, started uploading uh, the podcast to listening. So, like I said, if there's something that you want, a lot of
Mhm.
those I do end up and have access to. I can upload those into the streaming platform. So let me know, if you want to hear any of them, because we've also done like hydrogen water. We've
Mhm.
had Dr. Paul on, and hydration is just as important in the wintertime, because our bodies run, on this electrical current, and part of that is also the water. So there's sunlight, but also the hydration side.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, go back and give those a listen and let us know again if you would like us to upload those. Um, I learned. I learn stuff when we talk to guests like that, especially the fermented foods and um, last winter I really embraced that. In fact, you had a master class on
Mhm.
that that I also participated in, and that was great. And in fact, I still do a lot more of the fermented foods. Now, no, I'm not a sauerkraut girl. Sorry, no, not going to happen. But I do pickles and I do, yogurt, and so I do things like that, olives, and so I have leaned that way. You do more of the sauerkraut and that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
I love my ferments. So I have
Yeah.
anywhere from a seasonal vegetable ferment to, so I go beyond just the sauerkraut kimchi aspect.
Mhm.
I go into deeper. So, like I said, I have a seasonal vegetable one. I have a sea vegetable. So that is more of like the dulce weed and those type of things, which are higher in iodine, so that helps also with like the thyroid. Since I have, previous thyroid issues, I don't take an um, iodine supplement. A lot of people with thyroid issues, and I know there's other influencers and groups out there that push like Lugol's iodine.
Mhm.
That has also done a disservice for some.
Yeah.
So I get it through foods that I eat, right? I do seafood like oysters. I do bulk kelp. I do, and then I have this ferment that I will add in there. So I do incorporate it, but I also incorporate the carbs in the wintertime. So it's not just, meat, fat, and ferments, which is what the master class that I did. So I definitely, do incorporate beyond just that. I know there are people out there that only do meat and ferments. So I wanted to add that in there, that it's not only what I do, but I will do things like, hearty stews where I put potatoes and carrots, and, maybe my dinner time meal is more the meat and the ferment. And then I enjoy these hearty, warm, soup stews in the evening. Um, when I eat in the evening, because sometimes I do end up in fast, but I fast by skipping dinner instead of skipping breakfast.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't skip breakfast either. I learned that lesson years ago.
Hmm.
When I would wear a CGM and I would watch my continuous glucose monitor, and I would watch my blood sugar just keep climbing, and I wouldn't eat breakfast. And I hear this. I know you hear this. Well, I'm just not hungry in the morning.
Which is actually cortisol and stress,
Yep.
not anything else. And so when you are feeling that I'm not hungry feeling, it's actually because your body, you are stimulating the cortisol and you're driving this aspect of, you know, your metabolic condition even further. And I hate to say it that way.
Mm.
Um, but there I was there, right? I can end up and sympathize with people. I was at one point, right? I was that influencer as well that was
Mhm.
saying, to do these water fasts, to do even the fat fast, um, because I felt like that's, what we ended up and we needed. But
Mhm.
when we look at the body as a whole, we don't just look at the body as, someone asked me this earlier, don't I always have to be in ketosis in order to lose weight? No, we don't. We have to be able to use what we are putting in our body efficiently, right? We have two fuel sources, glucose and ketones, aka fat. And so we have to be able to use these fuel sources efficiently. And that is where we create the metabolic flexibility, is to burn between these fuel sources and being able to really rely on that. But when we are solely in a state of fat burning and ketosis, we can downregulate other processes. And that's what people aren't taking into account, right? They'll do. they'll be in ketosis long term, but then they start to lose their hair and they start to end up and have
Mhm.
other issues.
Mhm.
And it is such a disservice to so many people because they will say they feel great, right? They end up and they have lower inflammation. I did too
Mhm.
until I didn't.
Right. Right. Well, and you have experienced, and you have something to share with our folks. Um, Maybe you should share it and explain it.
Yeah. Um, so hold on, let me click some buttons here. Um, could you explain to me what is going on? Well, I don't. Sorry, I'm reading comments, and it says, "Could you explain to me what is going on?" Elaborate, because we're talking about time change, season change, and food change, and how those end up, how the time change, right? We just ended up and changed our clocks the beginning of November. Seasons are changing for many of us. We are heading, if you're outside of the uh, United States, you're such as Australia, you are going into spring, we are going into winter. So your seasons is going to end up and be different than us. And how the food changes for you is going to end up and be different than the food changes for me. But with all of that being said, okay, so what Sherri is talking about in regards of the food change, many of you have seen over the last, especially my dear sweet friends over here on Instagram, many of you have seen over the last several months, things have gotten different, right, with what I am doing. And I am being very strategic, but I am also being very open about what I am doing and what hasn't worked. Um, so to set the story for what I am talking about, I did 2.5 years as keto carnivore back in 2018, 2019, or 2019, 2020. I started to reintroduce carbs, was a little bit more keto, and what I felt was creating metabolic flexibility. I was adding a sweet potato to a meal, one day a week, right? I was adding other foods into to meals, and I was creating that metabolic switch, right? I was kicking myself out of ketosis, but I was getting right back in because I thought that's what I needed, right? I thought that's how it should end up and be, right? You kick yourself out of ketosis. How long does it take to get back into ketosis? And this is why I said I was doing a disservice, is
Mhm.
because now that we end up and we look at the fuel sources, and when we end up and we look at, the different macronutrients, it is a disservice because when I was doing that to myself, and we'll go into this as well, but I put a couple posts up because, one, my thyroid levels, right? There were things that got better as carnivore. There was things that got better as keto, but then it stopped working, and I was starting to lose hair again, and I was having, still the Hashimoto symptoms. And then I started to gain weight. The weight that I had lost, right? I am on other videos, I am on other podcasts saying carnivore was great, right? It was going to end up and being the only way because I did lose 40 to 50 pounds initially when doing it. But then my triglycerides started to go up. My thyroid's T3 specifically started to come down. Um, Down as in like even lower than what it was as Hashimoto's. And so I had low T3, I had high antibodies, and I had triglycerides that were starting to go up. I also was starting to see A1C and my glucose creep up. Well, I felt, right, that I had to go harder, like
Mhm.
I was doing something wrong, right? Why was this the case? Why was my body not working with me? I must have to, go 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1 fat to protein, right? I did high protein, that didn't work. So then we started adjusting the fat to protein ratios. Because I must just need that therapeutic, right, level of ketosis. And so I would drive my ketones up. And that's when I created even the Fat Fast
Yeah.
Masterclass, because I felt, with the information of the community and place that I was in, right? I'm not going to end up and blame anyone else, but because of the space that I was in, I'll take accountability for myself here. The space that I was in, I felt that was the way to end up and go. It is. It's not that it is wrong, right? Fat fasting isn't wrong. Being in ketosis isn't wrong. It's a state of restriction that people stay in too long.
Yes.
That is where the problem lies. That 2.5 years for me, for my body, and what I was dealing with was too long. When I started to then reintroduce and create this metabolic flexibility, I thought I was doing better, right? Let's end up and throw the picture up. So this is what Sherri is referencing. So this picture on the left is me towards the end of my carnivore journey. You can see the insulin resistance coming back. You can see that the A1C, you can see a lot of the weight is coming back in the midsection. I look like I have a dad bod pop belly going on here, right? I then started to create a metabolic, flexibility, which is this middle picture. And I lost some weight. I lost probably 30 pounds. I gotta stop and think. So that was 2021 when I started to end up and reintroduce carbs, create metabolic flexibility in, kicking myself out 1 day a week, and really looking at seasonal food. Even at that point, I was doing seasonal food. Why is there 3 pictures? So when I ended up and was creating metabolic flexibility, we're going to slowly but surely, there we go. You'll see down here in the left hand side or right hand side, this is the weight, right? I'm going to pause it here for a second. So this is my scale. What this is showing is all of my weigh-ins. You can see as it plays, right? It's just kind of bouncing around. So it would come down, it would go up, it would end up come down, but it never really had a steady lowering. I lost, right? You can see that in the initial picture to the one where I'm in, this burgundy top. There is a difference. But any of you that have followed me on social media know that within the last 6 months, I have been doing something different. So here, the line is bouncing. Let's end up, okay. Oh, I didn't pause it soon enough. So in the last 6 months, I really started to look at the body as a whole, lean into what is going to end up nourish the body and what does it mean by fuel sources. When I talk about the fuel sources and when I talk about leaning into fats and carbs, I created base days and I created refeed days. My refeed days and carbs are a lot different than just the base day, right? And this is where I got to click buttons as I'm talking. So this is where so the chart. So my video didn't complete it here, but there is another dot over here on the right hand side. What have I done in the last 6 months that has created this steady loss? I leaned into the carbs. I allowed my body to make the shift from this initial picture to what it is today and still progressing. I am still not where I want to be. I am still not where I am heading. But what I will end up and say is don't fear the carbs, because there are so many processes in the body that do end up and need those carbs. I get it. I sympathize with you. I understand you. I am not out here saying that protein is bad. I am not out here saying fat is bad. What I am telling you is the fact of allowing carbs again made me realize and made my body realize that it could end up, and trust me, that it was not starving. It did not need to hold on to everything. It didn't need to live in the energy tanked, right? The hair falling out fight that it was in. It was able to regulate my thyroid. It was able to regulate, I I say hormones because that my hormones, right? I've had a hysterectomy. So as a quote surgical menopause woman, I relate to postmenopausal women. So it allowed my adrenals that ability to do what they need to do to help balance my body. And I'm just saying, my energy's come back. My hunger is stabilized. I opened the door for whole food carbs in season, not sugar, pasta, and cakes.
Yeah, yeah, I was just gonna say that. I mean, when you're doing white bread, pastries, soda, pop, wherever part of the country you live, candy, sugary cereals, um, that is not the carbs that Becky and I talk about. You have to understand what a good carb is and what a bad carb is. And I think people confuse that, right? But we get pushback even with a potato.
Mhm.
I'm not saying a sweet potato. I'm talking about a potato. I have three big ones laying over there that I'm gonna uh, um, put in the toaster oven tomorrow and get that going. But I'm not gonna eat it tomorrow. I'm gonna let it set overnight, right? And then eat
Mhm.
it the next day. So there's nutrient density in the food that Becky's talking about, rich in vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and um, the, the foods that literally the dense carbs, your hormones need it, right? I'm living proof of that as well. When I went militant carnivore for what, 2.5 years,
Mhm.
I tanked my thyroid and my hormones. Bad tanked. And I am still working my way out of that. And I am also introducing more carbs. And Becky and I have had this conversation about people are scared of carbs.
Well, and it's created a, there are so many influencers out there, right, that have created this dietary dogma in
Hmm.
regards of carb fear. And so people do end up and fear the carbs. And there are so many reasons why the body ends up and needs the carbs, not just the thyroid function, right? The T3 conversion, but there's also the aspect we when we are lower carb, right, there's lower liver glycogen, but which also impairs the T4 to T3. And so,
Hmm.
yes, there's that side of it, but then there's the stress response too. And so, low carb, no carb diets often end up and trigger a rise in the stress hormones. Again, remember we were just talking about cortisol in the morning. There's a lot of people that will say, why is my, why when I end up and I go low carb or no carb is my glucose running higher and trending higher, right? So it's this body's ability again, right, to end up and take what we're having. But when you break food down into, again, going back to what we talked about with time change, season change, and light, when you take food and take the labels out of it, right? The keto, the carnivore, the paleo, the whatever, whatever, whatever. When you take that out and you look at your whole food source for what it is and how it is going to fuel your mitochondria, how it is going to break down in the, transport chain, right, into energy. When you look at it as a energy molecule, right? We get
Mhm.
energy from various sources. It doesn't all just have to end up and come from food. But when you are aligning these sources, you are able to use those a lot better. And carbs support, again, they calm that stress response. It triggers that, quicker energy so the body feels safe. Carbs also
Mhm.
support the leptin side of things. Leptin ends up and talks to the thyroid, right? Leptin is a hormone signal that says, hey, we have energy on our body to use, right? You can burn this energy. And that is, one of the questions that I've got before also is, what is the difference in, weight loss metabolism and, maintenance metabolism? And, if I'm looking at this, but I also need healing, how do I end up and adjust? Well, that's where, again, this leptin has to be, firing properly, right? It needs
Mhm.
adequate glucose, but it also needs that insulin signaling to function well. And
Right.
when you down regulating the insulin signaling, right, creating this insulin suppression because you don't have, right, those receptor cells start to end up and be impacted. So, they start to end up and become sluggish. They start to down regulate as well. So there are a lot of, body temperature. The list goes on, right?
Yep.
And we've had several people that are like, I've reincorporated, right? And I
Mhm.
feel more energy. I feel better. I'm able to regulate my temperature, right? People are cold, which obviously, is a symptom of the whole thermogenesis side,
Yeah.
is a symptom of thyroid, but it's also a symptom of metabolism. Your body is a little thermostat. It needs to end up and be regulated. And if you aren't balancing these processes of the body with light, with food, with sleep and recovery, you're not going to end up and have great metabolism or metabolic condition. It does all have to play a role together.
Right. Yeah. Well, and remember when I came off that militant carnivore, which was so hard, right? Because I was so scared of carbs. And I had, for my first time in like 2.5 years, I had a steak and I had a sweet potato. And I was wearing my continuous glucose monitor, and that sweet potato spiked me, what was it, 80, 90 points? It
Yeah,
was
it was.
like I'm texting Becky as it's happening. And oh my goodness, right? Now, what most people do is they're like, oh my gosh, I can't eat sweet potatoes. I'm not going to do that again. And I'm going to go back to my militant carnivore or whatever militant that you're doing, your restrictive, whatever. Um, I had to teach my body how to utilize it.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
and that's where
yeah.
a lot of people do end up and come from is
Hmm.
your body is just simply relearning how to handle that glucose. And after years
Right.
of, keto and lower glycemic, right? Keto,
Hmm.
carnivore, whatever you want to end up and call it, your muscles and your liver cells had temporarily downregulated those GLUT
Yep.
receptors, the GLUT4 to be specific for anyone that is scientific here on me. Yes, I am streamlining a lot of these processes because we're running close to time, and I could go on for this forever. But it is down regulating those GLUT transporters, and so because you were giving your body those carbs regularly, now as you end up and you started to add them in, you started to have those higher peaks and more fluctuation, right? It was a lot of up and down, but when those transporters come back alive, right, come back online, those sharp peaks and post meal, reactive dips, right, that juncture started to end up, the time under the curve started to become a lot more close together, to where you retrained how to lose or how to use glucose efficiently. And yes, that it doesn't necessarily mean that you are insulin resistant, or that the food is bad, or that the carb count was too bad. It's a matter of, when this happens, you just simply have to, slowly end up and come back on. Maybe that means by 20, 30 grams of carbs, right? Until you are able to work up to a optimal target. Walk after a meal. Allow your body, allow those muscles to end up and uptake that glucose and support it, right? Don't just end up and eat a high carb meal and then sit on the couch like a couch potato, right? But really utilizing, and this is also for some people why nighttime dips happen. It can come from the cortisol, it can come from the liver and its process at night. So eating those carbs more midday versus,
Mhm.
eating them all in the evening makes a difference. You talked about your baked potato, and not necessarily eating it that night, creating
Mhm.
it into a resistant starch. So it is all about looking at, if you're going to incorporate carbs, how can you strategically put them, right,
Mhm.
to into your day that they are going to benefit you. If you're going to go after, after supper, after dinner walk in the evening time, and that's when you end up, then you may end up and be able to reintroduce more of those in the evening. But it's just what works for you and your body, and it's an adaptation, not a dysfunction. And I just said that in a meeting earlier today. What you are seeing when you are reincorporating carbs is not a continuation of a dysfunction. It is your body is trying to adapt to what you are doing. Your system is relearning how to flex between fuel sources, refill the glycogen like it is supposed to, use that glucose efficiently for the processes that it needs to. It may look messy, it may look hectic. I ended up, and I told you, get off your CGM and don't end up and track your glucose for a while, because what happened when
Yeah.
you were wearing your CGM? You sat there and you watched it, and then you freaked out because you were having responses that your body is supposed to have, but
Yeah.
then you're creating cortisol and you're creating a spiral because you're stressing over these numbers.
Yep.
Allow your body to do what it needs to do. We will come back to checking in. I just taught someone, or working with another client on the same thing, where they were coming from a keto standpoint, and they were checking blood sugar and they were checking ketones, and they're like, but my ketones are only zero point 0.4 and my glucose is, in the 90s. Okay, but your glucose is in the
Yeah.
90s is a lot better than, what it was before, because when they were, strict carnivore and they were fasting and, etc., it was like 120. So we're
Yep.
trending in the right direction.
Yep.
Stop tracking all the time, right? Stay steady with your macros, stay steady with your light, stay steady with minerals, circadian, all of that. Things will smooth out and you will start to end up and notice a difference. Don't just rely on a scale. Take your measurements, take the pictures that I ended up and I showed you, because it truly does end up and make a difference, even if the
Mhm.
scale isn't moving.
Right. So I've got a few wrap up tips here as well. Honor the light. Try to get the morning sunlight within 30 minutes of waking. That's a good start for you. Of course, we want you to see the sunrise, but it anchors your circadian rhythm. It boosts your mood and it sets your metabolism in motion for the day. Um, Front load your fuel, right? You want your breakfast within 30 minutes to an hour upon waking. Get that fuel source in there so it helps. I watched that personally with me with the fuel source. It would stop my glucose from continuing to climb, it would stop it and it would start trending back down. Eat with the earth, right? Seasonal local produce, rooted vegetables right now. Look to see what's in season in where you live. Um, uh, Cravings, instead of juggling your cravings, decode them. Are you tired? Are you uh, uh, um, cold? Are you emotionally depleted? Um, there's a restriction probably happening there, and you may want to look at that. Reset with the seasons. Again, revisit your sleep and your meal timing and your movement. Let the season shift you. Feed your gut garden. That's what we talked about, the fermented foods, right? To support your microbiome, and reframe the carb conversations. Carbs are not the enemy. Refined carbs are. Good carbs, they help align your hormone balance, your energy. So much good can come from the good carbs, but hopefully we've given you a lot of things to take away to think of. I know that was an hour packed uh, podcast here.
It was, and I know our audio listeners weren't able to end up and see the pictures, but there is definitely a difference. So if you want to end up and see the graphics that we were showing, jump over to YouTube, jump over to Instagram. We have the video on both of those. So again, really end up and work on the foundations, reset your metabolism, your cortisol rhythms. All of that has to end up and do with what we ended up talking about tonight. And the conversation will continue to go on because I feel this conversation needs to happen. We need to move away from so much dogma, so much camp, and we need to be able to have a open and honest conversation about these things. So tune in again. We may end up and bring the topic also to a roundtable, more for the side of the mental health aspect, and how to really work on this, because there is that mindset piece. When you look at it, not only from an eating disorder standpoint, but also a fear standpoint. A lot of people are fearing putting those in. So we appreciate you. As always, feel free to like, share, comment, and let us know if there's ever a topic you would like us to talk about. Have
Absolutely. Thank you,
a
guys. We'll see you next week.
have a